I'm here with Amanda Cavallo, who just finished this amazing mural inside this dome last month. And a lot of people were asking how you did this and where the inspiration came from. So would you please give us a walkthrough of this amazing artwork that you created?
I'd be happy to. Thanks, Rich.
Great.
Come on in.
Get right to it. Well, Amanda, there's a lot of places we could start with this, but why don't we start at the beginning with the sketch you sent me?
Sure. So we did a fair amount of planning ahead of time before I got out here, just kind of settling in on a design. And I pitched this concept that I've had a vision of for a long time, actually, since I discovered Super Adobe. And you said go for it. So we went forward with this mandala design. This was the original concept sketch that I sent you, which we, for the most part, followed. There's some adaptions along the way, which is normal. But yeah, this is essentially what we ended up with, which is this ceiling mural or interior dome crown, you might term it as, which is this mandala design with a southwestern theme to celebrate the land in which it resides, with a compass at the center pointing us north, which I wanted to be integrated into the design kind of subtly, but still be there. And it is inspired by the natural colors, the subdued colors of the desert, the flora and fauna that's native to here. And it's also inspired in large part by indigenous pottery that's native to this part of the world. We're building with clay, so there's a lot of artistic strategies in ceramics that could be applied at the building scale, which is really exciting to me. And I felt it felt right to let this be a piece that is very organic and feels handmade, and is kind of beautifully imperfect, you might say. And I love that it kind of feels like being inside a giant ancient pot in a way. Yep. And then the other aspect of the design, which to me is the most important part, is this integrated recessed light cove that traces the perimeter of the ceiling and throws light up over the mural and kind of makes it sing and provides this nice indirect even light for the space. So I think I can go over kind of the steps and the base plaster and schedule the prep work that it took to get to this point that we're at now, and then we'll get up on a ladder and get closer and get into more of the technical strategies that it took to build this. Okay. So this piece took in total about a month to complete up to this point, from prep to where it is now, which, as you can see, is still unfinished aside from the mural part. And that's including rest days. What was here when I first arrived was there was a built Super Adobe dome, built in one of your workshops, led by Jared and Noelani. Shout out to those guys, big fan. And there was some electrical in, and Rich, you had started with testing out the base plaster mix. And yeah, that was it. And then the first 2 weeks was essentially all getting this base plaster on the walls. This is the base plaster here, which is a mix of clay-heavy soil from the site, sand, and straw. And as well as that, we were doing a lot of testing of the finished plasters. Whenever you're building, doing natural building, you're using soil from the site and all soil is going to be different, so you want to do a bunch of different tests to see how it's going to behave, what ratios you need, how it's going to dry. So I was while Rich was finishing the electrical, I was focusing on doing a bunch of tests, throwing in pigments, seeing how the colors look once they're dried. So that was a few days, and then when we were getting the base plaster on all the walls all the way up, we had some friends and neighbors stop by to help, because it's just a lot of surface area to cover, and that made it go a lot faster. And then we ended up focusing on just getting the ceiling prepped and the base on first, in interest of time, so we could get this finished in time for the next workshop, for the last dome that you built. I also need to give a special shout out to Alexis Madrigal, my apprentice extraordinaire, who put a lot of time and sweat into helping me with this install, and she made the process so much more fun, and she did a lot of the legwork in getting the finished clay layer smoothed and prepped. So on top of this base plaster that you're seeing here is a finished plaster, which you can see a little bit of it here towards the top of the cove, but it is essentially the same material, but it's a finely sifted clay soil and finely sifted sand, and we used toilet paper as the fiber, and it's troweled on with a steel trowel in a thin layer. So that is what is finishing this whole ceiling and what the paints and the decorative parts are on top of. Okay, so once we had the finished plaster on up here and the cove light mostly formed in, I started in on the layout. First I measured some of the high and low points that are naturally occurring here and drafted them up on AutoCAD, so that I could figure out where these different rings should land so that none of them are kind of falling in a wonky place on the ceiling. And then I started sketching out the rings, just carving into the plaster with a screw, and attaching another screw to the center and the ceiling here. And this was a compass to help me draw perfect circles, somewhat perfect circles, for these different decorative rings. And I'll just start from the top, or that's the way that it was installed, from the top down. So starting with this Zia Sun design here at the center, which this lighter part is a lime plaster applied over the natural clay finished plaster, and it was carved away to reveal the natural clay behind. This centerpiece here with the little sun and moon, the compass nail was there, so once I had enough of this drafted out and I felt comfortable, then I took the nail out and came back to do this part towards the end. And next I created these triangular and diamond shapes as these three-dimensional reliefs, which is again a lime plaster. It's a lime clay hybrid plaster for these ones, which I applied with a trowel first, following the shape that I sketched in, and then using the trowel to carve it to shape. And these ones are more of a clay, natural color heavy plaster. And I also added some additional pigment over the top to get the color to be a little more saturated in this part. I used various found objects to help carve different shapes here, like these little holes and dots were used with a pen cap. And then these, we'll call them medallions, are fresco paintings of various animals and plants that are native to the area. And it's painted with a technique called fresco, which is a natural mineral pigment applied to the lime plaster while it's wet. And once it dries, it creates a bond that's permanent, and it will keep the color looking vibrant and permanent, wear resistant through time. So this is an example of the natural pigments that we use. This is a company called Earth Pigments. And this was what was used for the frescoes and the clay paints that you see on these other rings. So painting on the ceiling is a little bit challenging because I was up on a step stool on top of scaffolding trying to balance and crane my neck and paint. So something that helped was I decided to create little templates on paper first, sketching out the design, applying the pigment onto the paper, and trying not to move it too much, because as it dries, the pigment will just start to flake off because it's just the pigment with a little bit of water. And then I would come and apply the lime plaster. First I sketched out a circle by tracing a bowl and just scraping onto the finished plaster with a nail, applying the plaster again with the trowel, and then putting the bowl back over and carving around the bowl to try to get it as round as possible. I wasn't overly perfectionist about it. And then very quickly pressing the template while it's still wet onto the plaster until it soaked through the paper. And then when I pulled it away, it transfers at least some of the pigment on there. It wasn't perfect. A lot of it I kind of had to just reference it and eyeball it. But it's a race against time. You have to apply it while the lime plaster is not so wet that you're pushing the plaster around with the paintbrush, or that some of the plaster is coming off onto the paintbrush, but it has to be wet enough that the pigment will bond properly to it. So the template technique helped me to speed that process up, and I just kind of did one at a time. We'll keep moving down. So the next ring is this splash of color that is clay paint, and you notice some are a little more vibrant than the others. So this one did have some lime mixed in, which makes it kind of like a clay paint lime wash. It makes the color a little more saturated, and then there were a couple different colors that were brushed into a gradient, and then I came back with a nail and carved into that again to reveal the natural clay plaster behind. Same with this band. This one I used just a flathead screwdriver for some of the thicker line carvings. And then this one, which you can see is again a natural colored clay plaster, but it's a little lighter than the base plaster. It's a siltier clay gathered from a wash nearby the site, just to show the different colors that you can get based on the soil. And it had a little bit of a softer quality to it, which was great for stamping. So you can see these patterns here that are stamped in while it was wet, just using found objects. Like this is the back of this construction pencil, and this is these staples, the back of the staple for the finer lines. And then we also gathered mesquite leaves from the site and pressed them in with paper so that it's flush, which came out really cool. And the idea there is that these would naturally just dry out and yellow over time and eventually fall off. So that's kind of an interesting study or observation of time, like an interactive aspect to the design. And then the thought is once they all fall off, we can come back. There'll be the impression. There's one that fell off here actually that you can see the impression of the leaf remains, and we can come back in with some pigment and paint that in, because I think the green color of the leaf is actually really nice in the composition. Next, this is the natural base colored plaster, and we just painted with clay paint this kind of another Zia sun pattern that's continuous all the way around. Next, more clay paint gradient. This is getting to be more just natural tone clay paints with carving in. This was using a flathead screwdriver and a nail and a chisel. This was inspired by some native pottery that I loved, and then another warmer tone gradient of clay paint all the way down into the light cove. Okay, so now we're over at the light cove, and here's a little section drawing to explain what's happening here. But basically, we have the same plaster on the wall forming up around a cardboard form that we built to create this little shelf or pocket where a linear LED light strip is attached on the inside here. So here you can see this is the wall of the dome. The clay comes up and forms around this little cove. LED light fixture wraps around, and it's held on by an adhesive to the inside, and that is because this is the LED light here, which is cuttable, and it only bends in one direction. It only bends forward and backwards, not side to side, right? So in order to follow the shape of the perimeter of the dome, it's inside, like so. And then we also added some aluminum foil into the cove, serving as a reflector. So it's helping the light bounce off that and up into the ceiling and distribute the light evenly. So to form this little cove, we made these cardboard forms, which are covered in duct tape so that the cardboard isn't absorbing too much of the moisture from the clay, which is perfect because we're following this kind of irregular dome shape, so they're a little bit flexible. And it's a very small, tight space. This is probably 3/4 of an inch wide at most, and 1/2 an inch at the bottom, which is as tight as we could possibly get it and still be able to fit our fingers in the light fixture in here. So it's very sleek, very contemporary. And so before we actually mud in the forms, we reinforced it with some chicken wire lath. So we'd make the form and then kind of shape a piece of chicken wire around it, make sure it fit, and place it on the wall here, line it up, and then remove the form and staple on the chicken wire, and then base plaster over the back of the chicken wire, at least somewhat, so that way it's really secured and embedded into the plaster. And then form goes back in the chicken wire. It got 3 screws to secure it, and then we were able to bring the base plaster up to the underside of this lip, we called it, and that gives it a nice thicker, maybe 1/4 inch edge, straight edge at the top of the cove. So this is a little sketch. This is a napkin sketch, as we call it in the architecture biz. This is kind of a cut-through section of the form and how it was placed with the chicken wire, embedded with the finished plaster brought down. So I also wanted to show you it's important to provide a place for the driver for the light fixture. There's this little sensor that talks to a remote, and because this is dimmable, it kind of has this big adapter. So we made sure that we could provide a pocket for this guy to slide in there. And this part isn't complete yet. We've got an outlet box for the power, which will eventually be hardwired in. And so all of this will, once it's in place, get plastered in. So it will look eventually just like a continuous clean line. You won't see any of that.
Well, thanks, Amanda. That's really amazing. I feel like that's something that belongs in a museum, and I know other people said that too. We had a really cool art reveal night where you brought everyone in with the room dark, and everyone looked up and we turned the lights on, and people were just absolutely blown away. So, amazing job. And if this is interesting to you at all, stay tuned. We are planning a workshop where you can learn artistic plastering from Amanda here in a different room. Similar idea, probably on a smaller scale. And that will probably be late March or early April. And stay tuned for next month. We'll have the details for that.
We'll see you there.